Welcome to this webinar. This is a co-produced event delivered by the Bucks Send Information Advice and Support Service and sponsored by Families and Together, Carers Together in Bucks. This is the third of a series of webinars we'll be delivering aimed at increasing parent and carer knowledge and abilities to engage with the SEND system. This webinar will be recorded. The slides with clickable links to useful websites and the recording will be shared with you in due course. These will also be available on the FACTBucks website and the SENDIAS web pages in due course, details of which will appear at the end. You'll have noticed that you are automatically muted. Only the presenters will speak. Questions are encouraged. You'll be able to type in your questions at any time, and we will try to answer as many as possible at the end of the session. Please keep questions as general as possible. Questions about individual children are best asked privately via the SENDIAS online contact form available on their web pages. Questions will be moderated before they appear, which may take a few minutes. We will collect together all the questions and share the answers with you as soon as we can after the session. So if we run out of time today, your question will still be answered. Apologies for the slight delay in enabling you to join today, always technical things. If you do have a technical issue you go through, the best thing to do is to log out and try and log in again. Today's webinar will be presented by me, Andrew Howard, I'm Chair of FACTBucks, and by Sarah Smith, who is the SENDIAS team leader.
So today's programme will cover what the law says, co-production charter, you, the parent, as the expert, how to get the best out of meetings, how to influence paperwork about your child, what to do if things go wrong, and how you can help with improving the system for families with children with special educational needs. So, what are your legal rights? When you're trying to get your point of view across, it helps if you know what your rights are. What is the law around this issue? For example, did you know that schools must, by law, use their best endeavours to meet your child's special educational needs? So it's helpful if you can find out about special educational needs law, guidance and local policies. So how do you know where to find your legal rights? The Children and Families Act was a new legal framework for SEND law introduced in 2014. The framework contains the legal rights to ensure that children and young people with a disability get the help they need. It is a very important law for children and families with special educational needs. The Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Code of Practice 2015 is guidance. It was brought out with the Children and Families Act. It is there to add more information about how the processes called for by the Children and Families Act should be put in place. And on the next slide, I've included some recommended sites to help you to find clear explanations of your rights. So there's the IPSI website, Child Law Advice and Contact, all are well worth looking at to find out more about what your rights are. So then thinking about law and policy and guidance, law trumps policy. Law is a must. Law takes precedence over guidance and policy. When we look at relevant law in a moment, you will see that law always uses the word must. This means it has to be done. Parliament has decided this, whereas the SEND Code of Practice is statutory guidance. It often also uses the word should. So where the code said something should be done, it means that although it is not a legal requirement to do this, it must be considered, and that bodies such as local authorities and schools are expected to explain any departure from it. An example from the SEND Code is that schools should meet parents of children with special educational needs at least 3 times a year. You may also hear people talk about the Buckinghamshire policy for something. This means the local way of doing something, how we do this here, usually based on the law, but important to know that policies are not the law. Sometimes it will be useful if you check for yourself whether what you are being told is the law or just a local way of doing things, a policy. For example, every school in Buckinghamshire has a linked family support worker. It's a Bucks policy to provide these. It's not a legal requirement. A policy is a way of doing things decided by an organisation. So as I've said, it is not the law. Local authority policies must be in line with the law. So another example, as I mentioned, there is law about what schools must do to meet special educational needs. Buckinghamshire has policies and guidance about how this should happen locally, such as the ordinarily available provision guidance, and I've included a link on the slide. So, do your views count? Yes, they most definitely do, and that's really the aim of this session, is to get that across. Your child's views and your views too must be taken into account. The Children and Families Act 2014 says they must be, and these sections that I've listed here in blue on the blue boxes are Section 19 principles from the Act. So the local authority must have regard to your views, wishes and feelings. It must have regard to the importance of you participating as fully as possible in decisions. It must have regard to the importance of you being given the information and support you need to make it possible for you to participate in those decisions. And it also must have regard to the need to support you to facilitate the development of your child or young person and to help him or her to reach the best possible educational and other outcomes. And your rights are paramount if your child is age 16 or under. Young people over compulsory school age have their own rights. Most young people will continue to want or need their parents and other family members to remain involved in discussions and decisions about their future. Some young people will not have the mental capacity to make certain decisions or express their views, and we will provide a webinar with more information about this later this year, because it's quite a complicated topic. But basically, your views very much count. So the principles on the previous slide, which was 9.20, which was the one that said yes on it, all highlight the importance in law of making sure that you as parents and carers are listened to and given the right information and support to contribute to decisions about your child. In fact, these principles are the first section of Chapter 1 of the SEND Code, and everything which follows in the code is built around them. And the slides, I think we've just had one, and then the next couple, all contain further sections from the SEND Code of Practice explaining how families are to be involved. So that's the idea of that. Was I wanted to show you what an emphasis there is on that in the code and how important it is, and how everybody should be working to make that happen for you. So in on the previous slide, 9.21, it talks about that they should consult the child and the child's parent throughout the process of assessment. They should involve the child in the process. They should have regard to the views, wishes and feelings, and they should enable you to have control. And then in the next slide, which I think has possibly disappeared temporarily, it talks about, so that's slide 10, which is about section 9.27 of the SEND Code. It talks about local authorities having early discussions with parents of a young person during the EHC needs assessment process. That's the Education, Health and Care Needs Assessment process. That local authorities must work with parents and children and young people to understand how best to minimise disruption for them and their family life. So that's a very, something that you can perhaps refer to at times if, if you feel that that isn't happening for you. You can refer to this section of the code. And that you must be given with impartial information, advice and support. So this is the next slide actually that I'm talking about now, 9.27, so that's slide 10. This last point that I'm talking about is about what we do as a SENDIAS service, actually, is provide impartial information, advice and support to help you to take part effectively. So then the next slide, also from the same code of practice, talks about how all of this needs to be coordinated. So again, talking about minimizing disruption, having a single point of contact, and making sure that everything is well coordinated as possible. So this involvement, support and coordination expected from SEND Code of Practice is all about families and professionals communicating and working together successfully to meet the needs of children with special educational needs and disabilities. So that's what I'm trying to get across with what the code says. So over now to Andrew, who will explain more.
Working together, co-producing, is, as Sarah says, at the heart of the best practice for special educational needs and disabilities, and it's enshrined in the Children and Families Act. Here in Bucks, we now have a charter setting out our aim and principles when we speak of co-production. The principles are that everyone is welcome and treated with care and respect. Everyone's opinion is not only listened to, but is equally valued and included. Everyone communicates respectfully and in a timely fashion. Everyone works together to achieve the best outcome, offering compromise where necessary. Everyone acts with trust and transparency. The Charter has been agreed and signed by the Council, by the Clinical Commissioning Group on behalf of the National Health Service, and by FACTBucks. Co-production only works if it is present in every aspect of the special educational needs and disabilities world. So the Charter envisages how that will look at different levels. From the individual discussions about a child or young person's needs, to the operation of services, to the setting of strategic goals and the use of funds. It will be accompanied this year by an online pledge, which anyone and everyone will be encouraged to sign to show their commitment to making co-production more than just a word. So co-production at all levels and in all ways should be seen and should be acted through. So it's important to remember now that in co-production, as in much, much more, we, the parent carers, are vital. Parents have always been key, but the Children and Families Act places much greater emphasis on that and finally puts in law what parents already knew in practice. Parents and carers are the expert when it comes to their child and family. They know what works, and often the solutions parents come up with are far more practical and sometimes more cost-effective. We need to have the confidence to make our voices heard. The next slide talks about language. It has a list of language that you might use in relation to your non-disabled child, if you have one. It also has language that talks about that which relates to a disabled child. So, for example, you may talk about your child, your non-disabled child, as going to school. But in quite a lot of conversations you'll have about your disabled child, they'll talk about needing a placement. For example, we may have, my son goes swimming for a non-disabled child, but in the SEN world, we'll talk about needing access to a mainstream activity. As parents, we need to be aware of this language change, and we need to use it when we can to help professionals in their conversations, but we also need to relate it to our daily lived experiences. So you can use language wisely to get what you want. So here comes up some of those suggestions that we put through. Has a placement, goes to school, uses special treatment, transport, gets a bus. Access to mainstream activities, as I said, we might say goes swimming if they're non-disabled. Is in transition, is moving up to school. Those sorts of language. It's important to understand what those languages are used in the SEN world, but also what they mean in the real world. So you can use language wisely to get what you want, depending on the situation you're in. Professional language and terminology can have its uses, such as when discussing a child's needs with professionals, or when filling out a form or making a request for an EHC needs assessment. It can help to show you are knowledgeable and know what you want. But this use of language could confuse or distract others who do not have your expertise. In any situation, don't assume understanding. You may need to explain a condition and what its impact on your child in simple terms to get your message across. Also, we should be aware that using these terms when your child is with us may have a negative impact on their self-esteem, as may concentrate more on their needs or diagnosis than what they need in terms to help them to improve and to grow. So remember, parents are experts. So what did you do before you had children? What skills did you develop? Often we forget that we have not always been parents or carers. Think about all the things that you do for your child now. Generally, a parent of a child with SEN will be doing more than a parent of a non-disabled child at every comparable age. And probably this is more of a contrast the older they get. What skills do you use now as a parent? When you are facing conversation with individuals who are in their small field experts, remember that your strength comes from the breadth of your skills and the extent of your experience and all those hats. You may recognize some of these roles. You may have others. Think about all the knowledge, skills, and expertise these tasks give you and how you support your child in so many different aspects of their lives, typically more intensively than other parents will need to do. Often what might be the simplest of tasks for a parent of a non-disabled child will require a high level of planning and skill from a parent of a child with SEN, such as a trip to the shops or the park. So you have more expertise than most parents. You also have expertise which professionals don't have because you know your child best. Most professionals have expertise around a specific difficulty, such as a hearing difficulty. They don't know how your child is impacted by their difficulties as well as you are. What other responsibilities do you have apart from looking after your child with SEN? For example, do you have other children, other family members to care for, a paid or volunteer role, night shifts, running a business? These tasks will also give you skills. Juggling these responsibilities with caring for your child with SEN, getting the most from meetings and appointments about them, means that you are likely to be more skilled than most parents in soft skills such as empathy or diplomacy, resilience, organisation, making sense of paperwork. Before you engage with anyone new, just remember your strengths and remember always that they need to hear your voice because it will make a difference. Sarah.
So now we are going to focus on meetings and how to get the best from them. So to start with, before the meeting, is the date right for you? Maybe you're busy or have not had a reasonable amount of notice for the meeting. You can ask for it to be changed if not. Do you know what format the meeting is, who is coming and what the meeting is for? Ask if you don't know, if it hasn't been explained to you, it should have been. Do you want someone to attend with you? You could bring a friend or a SENDIAS advisor, for example. Before the meeting, you should always let the meeting organiser know that you want to bring somebody and give their name and role. Will the arrangement suit you? Where is the meeting? Is its location? Is its location and venue easy for you to get to? Ask if you would prefer to attend remotely. Do you need an interpreter or other help to be able to express your views? So, preparing for the meeting, other things to think about. So examples of paperwork could include the agenda for the meeting. So make sure you've been given the paperwork, and an example could be the agenda, so you know what will be talked about. It could include reports about your child. If the meeting is about your child's SEN support plan or EHC plan, you should be given that too in advance of the meeting. You should also receive notes of what has been decided in previous meetings. These might be a simple list of actions for an informal school meeting, or as much as a completed annual review report, which is several pages long. So think about making a list. What questions do you have? What key problems can be solved at the meeting? What problems are less important? Is there law, guidance or policy which might help you? And what will be a good result from the meeting? If any problems are smaller and less significant, then only raise these if there is time. You may want to use checklists, tools and prompts to help you to prepare, such as the following. So a checklist with headings like this might help you to prepare. So it's got some of the things we've talked about on it. So what your concerns are in questions, what other people's interest in the decision might be, and then the law about it. So that's the external, internal law, policy, guidance, and then what possible options there could be to get to where you want to be at the end of the meeting. That sort of thing. So you could have a look at something like that. You may want to think about questions like on this slide that schools often send you in advance of the meeting. And they send you these to make sure that everyone is focused on the child and that everyone has a chance to voice their views. So what do you appreciate, like and admire about your child? What does he or she like about him or herself? And what is important to your child now and will be in the future? And what support do they need to keep healthy and safe? And anything that you're struggling with, any issues you're struggling with, and really what is working and not working from different perspectives. So there's also tools and things you can use to help you to get answers to those questions. So because you need to really understand your child's views and be able to relay those, especially when your child is young or if they have communication difficulties. So there's some suggestions on this slide about that, and the plan for your child is much more likely to work if their views are understood. So there's that one, and then we've got one about what a perfect week would look like. So it may be a good idea to think about what a perfect week would look like for your son or daughter. If they could have the best week ever, what would that look like? Who would be there? Where would they go? What would they do? Try to think big and not just stick to what is currently practical or achievable. And this is a good way of trying to work out what your child's dreams and aspirations are, and that can be very useful to inform any meeting that you have. So now at the meeting, so a key thing to do at the meeting is to make sure you understand what's going on, get the facts straight. So who is there? So you need to introduce yourself, make sure you know who else is there, what their role is. If you're not sure, you can ask. If there's someone hasn't arrived that you were expecting, then ask why they're not there, so that you're sort of fully informed. And make sure you know how long the meeting is going to be and if anyone has to leave early. Ask for time to read any new reports if you need it. Sometimes you might be given several reports to read at the meeting. It's perfectly fine for you to ask for extra time to read that during the meeting, or even to ask for the meeting to be postponed. So feel confident that that's a perfectly reasonable thing for you to do, and you shouldn't have been put in that position really. Usually you should have been given any reports beforehand and given time to digest them. If there are any words or abbreviations you don't understand, ask for them to be explained. In all likelihood, others there won't know what they mean either. And then, are you clear on what has been agreed? Has it been written down? And find out how you should keep in touch and agree a date for a further meeting if it will be necessary to check how your child has progressed. So also at the meeting, you need to focus on getting your views across. So you will be most effective in the meeting if you can stay calm and confident. Maybe try taking a moment before the meeting to remember a time, if you can, when you have felt calm and confident. Imagine you are there again now, and use that strength from feeling confident to help you now in this meeting that you may be feeling quite worried about. You may be feeling emotional. This is perfectly understandable, as the meeting is about your child and the difficulties they have. At these kind of meetings, it's all too easy to feel on your own and judged, and that your views don't count. Please just know that the opposite is true, and take strength from that, as we've tried to explain. The law makes sure that your views are heard. Keep your list that you've prepared in front of you and mark off as your concerns are discussed. Have a drink and maybe a box of tissues with you just in case. At the meeting, ask for a 5-minute break or so if you are feeling overwhelmed. Don't feel that that's not something that you could do if you need time to recover. Then think about your tone of voice and your body language and eye contact. Thinking about that and how that comes across will make a difference. For example, you may want to avoid a posture which could look confrontational, such as sitting with your arms crossed. Expect to be listened to. At the same time, make sure you are listening to others. No one should talk over someone else. And give specific examples. So, for example, my child came home yesterday very upset because of problems at playtime. This has happened 5 times in the last fortnight. Or I'm worried because Zoe is still not able to write her own name. So be as specific as you can, and even voice what the child has said themselves, because it helps you to get your views across. And you can gently refer to the law and guidance if you feel it's that you are not getting your views across, or that there's a misunderstanding about the law. So you can say something like, well, my understanding is that my child's needs have to be met. I read it in the SEND Code of Practice. Is that not the case? And get them to respond. Or my understanding is that Buckinghamshire Council has guidance for schools on the help which can be given to children with SEND. It's called Ordinarily Available Provision. Shall we have a look at it now together to see what is possible? Use the time wisely, make sure agreed actions are recorded, and stay relevant. So, for example, we wouldn't recommend using an annual review meeting to make a complaint. There are separate procedures for complaints, and the annual review has a set purpose, and it would be a shame not to get the most out of the annual review meeting because of other concerns. So at the meeting, asking questions in meeting about your child can be difficult, especially if you're feeling nervous, angry or upset. As I said, sometimes meetings can be an emotional experience. Thinking about how to phrase questions ahead of time can make a difference. Keep the meeting positive and set the stage for a positive relationship. So if you can start with something positive, that can be helpful. So something that everyone can agree about. So it could even just be the weather. Isn't it a lovely day to get a yes, it is. And then thinking about what everybody likes about your child, or thank them for helping with what they have helped with. If there's something that you can say about the person, it's a contribution that is positive, then start with that, because that can obviously help people feel that also other people coming, the professionals may feel anxious too, and it just helps everyone to calm down a little bit and realise that this is going to be a meeting where everyone's working together in the interests of your child. So again, you might want to emphasise about how you would like to work together with everybody. So you could ask something like, how can we help my child to make progress with his concentration together, or something like that? What can we do together to help my child? And also make sure that you've understood things as they were intended to be, so they've got the meaning right. So it's often useful if somebody says something and you don't understand, or you think it might mean something you don't want it to mean, then it helps to be absolutely sure about what they mean. So ask them to maybe put it into different words. That can slow down everything as well, so that people can rethink how they're phrasing things and perhaps put things in a more palatable way that's again a more cooperative way. So that can be more helpful. So you could say something like, "I'm not sure what you mean. Please could you put that another way for me?" Or, "Could you give me an example of what you mean, or how that would look, or how that would work?" And if things aren't moving in the direction you wanted, you could try something like, "Have you considered trying blah, blah, blah?" Or, "I've heard that something or other can be very helpful. Could we try that?" Or, "If you can't do this thing that I have suggested, what could you do instead?" So those sort of things. So it's not closing anything down, it's keeping everything open and friendly, and that will help. So at the meeting, sometimes there will be difficult situations to deal with. For example, you might be told something like the help you want is too expensive, or your child doesn't need any help, or your child doesn't need more help. Or you might be told something like the school has other children with more needs than yours, or that the school doesn't see your child's problems there. Maybe there's something that happened at home and school doesn't really think it's relevant to them. So it can be useful to put yourself into the shoes of the other people attending the meeting. Imagining what their perspective is can help you to forecast how they will react. This can then help you to plan your response. For example, if you are asking for your child to have additional help, your special needs coordinator or SENCO may be concerned about the potential cost of this, or say that your child doesn't need the help. And it will be important not to be put off by this type of response. So, for example, don't feel pressured to pay for help outside school. Find out about the law to help you to prepare. As I've said, a school must use its best endeavours to meet your child's special educational needs. Try to change the focus away from funding and resources and back to the needs of your child and the law. Ask questions about your child's difficulties, their level of attainment and the rate of progress. Are they, are all of those understood, and is the rate of progress something that everyone would expect and think is good enough? What will be the impact on your child if they don't get extra help? If your discussion shows that there is a continuing difficulty which is not responding to usual classroom help, special educational help provided by the school may be required. If so, make suggestions which open up new options. So, for example, my son has this need, what sort of things would help him? How about such and such? I wonder if such and such. Often choosing the right words and avoiding the wrong ones helps. So the next slide looks at choosing the right words. So again, I've included a few suggestions here that will help you to keep everything open and open to possibilities, rather than being very concrete about something. And then the next slide explains about trying to avoid the word "but" and "I'm afraid" and "however." So just really shorten your sentences. Take out the word "but," which always sounds like something's going wrong, and just so, for example, it says, "I see your point, but," and then that could become, "I see your point, the effect it would have on us." So always talk about how something affects you or your child, or rather than talking in general terms. because if you're saying, well, this is how it's going to affect me, nobody can actually argue with that. That's it's how you're so it makes it more likely that people will listen to you. And then again, other words to avoid, and of course these are words that professionals should also be avoiding. Can't, no way, impossible. Again, try and say how, if there was a difficulty, give examples of how that would affect you, and then acknowledge that something is important for somebody else. That's clearly very important to you. The difficulty from our point of view is blah, blah, blah. And then this slide next with helps to sum up these suggestions. So this is the one with the cartoons on. So it includes asking open questions, as we talked about, helping each other to feel comfortable through respectful behaviour, listening and being listened to, checking understanding and making suggestions. And as I've said, these slides will all be available to you after the session. So then the next slide is about getting the best from a meeting at the end of the meeting. So at the end of the meeting, try to be sure about which actions have been agreed and who will be responsible for carrying out the actions. And make sure that, as I've said, make sure that the organiser has recorded the actions and that they are going to share those with you, and decide whether or not there needs to be a follow-up meeting, and thank the host for the meeting. So after the meeting, I suggest that you give a reasonable time for actions agreed to be done and to take effect. So obviously it depends what the action is, but yes, that's something to bear in mind. Sometimes things can't be done instantly, but you might expect something to be done within sort of 3 weeks or something. And follow up in writing if you still have concerns, and ask for advice from SENDIAS service if you need it. And I have included on the next slide, we have a leaflet which again I'll send round to you and will be available on our website and be available for FACTBucks on the FACTBucks website too, about preparing for a meeting, which includes some of the tips that we've discussed today, and also this expert tips for health appointments. That's a link that you'll be able to follow up if you want to help you get the most from appointments with when you're seeing the GP or a consultant with your child. So then moving on then from meetings to paperwork. So you can see on the slide that it is much the same as with preparing for a meeting, being clear about what the purpose of the paperwork is, being as brief and clear as possible, and only including relevant information. So think about the person receiving the information. What do they need to know from you to make their decision or give you a helpful response? Think about whether it's worth including a lot of past history or medication details or complaints. Maybe they're not going to be relevant, and it sort of masks what your real concerns are. So yeah, my suggestion would be to be as brief as possible and only include what is actually relevant for the situation you're in now. And give examples, including the impact, frequency and scale of any difficulties. For example, such as I've tried to get my child to school every day this week, but on 4 mornings she screamed and cried and fought so much that I couldn't even get her dressed. It takes her at least an hour to recover from these episodes, which is affecting family life, and she's missing out on education. And quote professional advice. So for about the same child, my GP says she's highly anxious and has referred her to CAMS. And quote your child if you can. My child says she doesn't want to go to school again because she can't do the work and has no friends. So that's rather a sad story. but yes, if you can quote people and show how it's impacting you and your child, and that's always helpful. Try to avoid blaming individuals if possible, and make sure you send your paperwork to the right person or team, and email is best so that you get an email chain and can follow up if you don't get a response easily, and you can also check that the person has received it. So the next slide is about influencing your plans and reports and reviews. So SEND support plans, try to attend your termly meetings when they come up. Make sure that plans are reviewed. Let your school know if you think any needs have been missed off, or if the help being provided does not seem to be enough. And if you're going through an EHC needs assessment, use a template to help you to know what to include. Send in any diagnosis letters and recent reports, ideally less than 2 years old. Currently, only about 20%, 1/5 of parents and carers in Buckinghamshire take the opportunity of sending in their views about their child for an EHC needs assessment, according to Buckinghamshire Council figures. And this is a big gap, and it will mean that the plan, when it is issued, it is not likely to be as good as it can be for your child, because it will have missed out that very important factor of your views. Your child may be assessed by a professional. Often the professional will want to speak to you too. If you have time, prepare for professional calls and appointments and assessments in the same way as you would for a school meeting. So that, as part of the EHC needs assessment, you might have several assessments for your child, and if they do want to speak to you, try to be prepared. And then when you get your EHC plan, if your child has been issued with an EHC plan, obviously that's only a very small proportion of children in Buckinghamshire. Make sure that if you are not happy with the plan, that you send in any suggestions for changes. So you've got perfect right to make suggestions. If you don't like the look of it, if there's things on it that you don't think are right, you should send those in within 15 days of receiving the plan. And you have a right to ask for a meeting with an officer as well at that point, if you think it's going to be necessary. So annual reviews. So it's helpful if you contribute to annual reviews, thinking about what's changed since the last review. Is your child meeting their outcomes? Does the plan need changing? So send in your views before the annual review meeting, and attend the meeting itself and speak up. And we have webinars on contributing to annual reviews, which will be available soon. So, for example, I was talking about how you could contribute to a EHC needs assessment and an EHC plan if your child has that. So on an EHC plan, there are sections A to K. So there's lots of different sections, and they're in alphabetical order on Buckinghamshire plans. Section A is for the view of your child and you. But these views about what is important now and hopes for the future, what works well and what your child is like, are not just for section A. They should run through the whole plan like a golden thread, so that you and your child, if they are able to do so, recognise him or herself in the plan. So once again, it's really important that you contribute to this, and if you need more help to do so, SENDIAS can help. So how do I know who to contact? So if you want to discuss your child's special educational needs and they attend a mainstream early years setting school or further education college, the person to get in touch with is the special educational needs coordinator, inclusion lead or similar. Alternatively, if they attend a special school, the first port of call is usually the class teacher. So I've also included on here contact details for the integrated SEND team health teams and social care. That's the first link, send support services. Then the next one is about the local offer for Buckinghamshire. So that's where you can find, in sort of simplified language, everything about what's available locally for children with special educational needs, and some processes that affect you. And then if you need more detail, you can look on Schools Web, and I've included a link there. And all of this will have information about who, how to get hold of the right teams. So what is reasonable to expect? So expect to be listened to and responded to. This is a must in line with the Section 19 principles we mentioned before. Expect respect for you, your child, and your circumstances. As I mentioned, arrangements should be made which allow you to contribute, whether this means that a meeting is held at a time to suit you, or you are given the information you need to make sense of it, or some extra support so that you can join in. The next are good practice. They are shoulds. So allow professionals at least 5 working days to respond to you. Expect help to be put in place within at least 3 weeks of it being agreed. If it isn't, then you could ask why not. Expect to be invited to a meeting about your child with SEND 3 times a year. This is a should from the SEND Code of Practice, and it's not compulsory, but it is advisable. If your child has an EHC plan, then their annual review meeting will be one of those 3 meetings. Then what to do if things go wrong? So you will have the opportunity to challenge any decision, whether it is based on law, guidance, or policy. Legal decisions, such as whether or not to agree to provide an education, health and care needs assessment, can be challenged in court. In this example, via the National SEND Tribunal. Any other decision made by the education provider, local authority, or health organisations can be challenged. Sometimes there will be an internal appeal process you can use, such as with home to school transport. If there is no appeal process, you will need to challenge the decision by making a formal complaint. You can use the same ideas we have discussed to help you to communicate what you want clearly in complaints and appeals. The IPSI link here may be useful. In particular, IPSI has model letters which may be relevant for your complaint. And the information here talks about what to do when you've exhausted complaints procedures as well. So who to contact if things go wrong? So we recommend you always try to sort things out informally before you use the complaints process. So just talking to the first person that you can, so possibly the SENCO or the class teacher, just try to iron out any difficulties. And it's often the smoothest and simplest way of doing something. But if you're really stuck, you may want to make a complaint. So I've put some information on the slide about how to do that. And then over to Andrew.
It's a very true statement that change only happens when people turn up. The SEND reforms put a lot of emphasis on the voice of parents, as we've heard, being a catalyst for change, not only in their own child's life, but also on the wider stage. The co-production charter, about which I spoke earlier, makes it clear that parents have a key role to play in improving things at all levels. It does not require much. Become a member of FACTBucks and respond to surveys or offer comments to questionnaires or via the Facebook page. If you have time, you might like to join a parent dialogue group. These meet to help improve key services like CAMS, child and mental health services, therapies, and transport. The next step will be to represent other parents in strategic discussions. Not for everyone, but someone needs to do it. There are also local options to improve things, like being a school governor, or even just joining a support group to help other parents by sharing your story and giving them the confidence to speak when they need to. We're offering at the end of this presentation a series of useful links for you. One might be to look at the campaign from the Children's Disabled Partnership, which is a thing called Secret Life of Us, which shows you the impact that the voice of parents can have on the future of the shape of provision of services for young people. We've provided you the links for the SENDIAS service, which is there to help you and your child or young person in all situations. If you want to get contact with them, the best thing to do is to use their contact form. This is particularly useful for new service users, and do sign up for their email updates, which will also bring you links for webinars like this and also the annual review ones, which Sarah spoke about earlier. If you need a quicker take up, then the other thing to do is to try their live web chat. They're running those twice a week on set times, and that link is also available through their web service. You can obviously contact them by email, and they do have a voicemail on their telephone service. And finally, and not last but least, is the FACTBucks website, and where you'll find information on webinars like this, on our surveys, on other things that are going on, and news and information. And we also have a Facebook page which provides more up-to-date information as much as we can. Now I think it's time for your questions.
Hi, thank you very much, Sarah and Andrew, for the presentation. Yes, we've had quite a few questions come in through the webinar. The first question we received was, how do you define the power of views being regarded? If annual review processes go wrong, and meaning information not collected, for example, reassessment, then views aren't accurately heard. Does that mean there is a legal failure? If so, does that change the speed at which the local authority should try and resolve requests to attend the case or reassess?
That's one for Sarah.
I had a feeling it might be. I think that sounds quite a specific set of circumstances, so it might be worth the person making the query to contact SENDIAS, and we'd try to get an advisor to look into that in more detail. Generally, there's as I've mentioned, there's opportunities to appeal, and so if there's legal, there can be a legal right to appeal in a certain situation. There is an issue with delay. So delay, administrative delay, that is, what you can make complaints about and perhaps approach the Ombudsman, or possibly even ask for a judicial review. That is another option. They're all quite involved, and I think ideally we would speak to anybody that wanted to had those kind of concerns and try to help you to resolve them, ideally without doing any of those things, but just trying to make sure that whatever it was that's missing is provided. And so it's so talking first is always recommended, either with us or whoever it is that you need to get in touch with. Sometimes we can help you to get in touch with people. So that's not a very good answer, but that's I'm not sure if I can think of anything else at the moment.
Thank you, Sarah. We have another question here. What is a way forward meeting?
Okay, so a way forward meeting is an example of a Buckinghamshire policy. So it's not a legal requirement to have a way forward meeting. They are offered sometimes. For example, say you have made a request for an EHC needs assessment and the request has been refused by the county panel. Sometimes county offers a way forward meeting, which is usually, if your child does attend a school or a setting, it would normally involve the school and the setting, and in non-COVID times be at the school, and it would be, they would normally send a representative and talk through the reasons for the refusal, and they would try to help you to make the best SEND support plan for your child with the school as can be provided under ordinarily available provision. So the important thing to know is it's not part of the legal process. So if you are thinking you want to challenge you want to go to tribunal, then you could have a way forward meeting, but you would also need to go through the option of speaking to the mediation service called Global Mediation in Buckinghamshire and deciding whether or not you want to have a mediation meeting, and then getting a mediation certificate and then filling in an appeal form. So it's very much not a replacement for any of these things, but it can be a very useful way, as I've talked about. It's a useful informal way of getting getting your views heard, maybe getting some better help for your child, even if your child, even if you went to mediation and maybe even tribunal and there was an agreement to assess, it's going to take time. In the meantime, your child might need additional help, and that meeting might help put that in place for your child in the interim. So, it can be. It can be useful.
Thank you very much. We have another question here. How do I get a SEN statement or individual care plan, etc.?
Okay, so we normally talk about two different things. So we talk about the graduated approach in Buckinghamshire. So usually children, most children are helped with sort of normal classroom differentiation, high quality teaching, and the skilled teacher will sort of make adjustments in the classroom to suit individual children to help them to make progress. If a child does need help which is additional or different to that required by usual classroom practices, then it could be that they think about putting your child on a SEN support plan, an SEN support plan. So that's the sort of first stage of individual help. And in Buckinghamshire, there's a great deal of help that can be given to children at that level. Schools can provide up to the equivalent of 13.5 hours of additional help a week, and that's equivalent to £6,000 a year up to of help from their own resources, so without requiring an EHC plan. And the sort of help that Buckinghamshire expects them to give is all detailed in the ordinarily available provision document that I mentioned. So it's really useful document to have a look at. It's divided into different kinds of needs that your child might have, and you can talk to your school about what sort of things from that document they can put in place for your child. So that's the sort of first stage of additional help. At any time, whether or not they are on SEN support, you do have a right to request an education healthcare needs assessment. So you do have a right to do that, and there's a legal test about whether or not that assessment is agreed or not. What we would say with that is that, yes, you can do that at any time. It's obviously more likely that Buckinghamshire will accept it if there is very good evidence that the school is already doing everything they can under SEN support. But that isn't in the legal test for an EHC needs assessment, is that the child has or may have special educational needs, and the help that they require may need to be delivered by way of an EHC plan. So there's a lot of mays and in that. So there's but I suppose basically what I'm saying is it's easier for you if you've got some evidence of your child's needs, that will help you to get this through either straight away or with a bit of further advice about what to do next. If the answer is no. Yeah, so I hope I've answered that question.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for just one more question. Can you ask for your annual review meeting timing to be changed? Mine is a January date. I think that has hindered the process, so moving forward I would prefer October or another better time of year.
I'll go for that one. Sarah could give you the legal answer to that, but I would say as a parent, the question is yes, ask and discover the answer as to why not. I mean, in a school with a large number of children with educational healthcare plans, it might be a timing issue, and the annual review is usually based on the date in which the plan was itself approved. So our daughter's happens to arrive in November because that's when her first plan was approved, but other people's will be at other points in the year. But there's no reason why you can't have a conversation and ask for it to be moved. I mean, there is a legal way of you could ask for an emergency annual review in order to change the date if you wanted to. That's the legal way of doing it. But as a parent, I would start with the conversation with the school and say, is it possible that we could move this from January to October, particularly as we're coming up to phase transfers? Or at those points, they'll be more interested in moving them because it does assist the process. So yes, I would ask. I'd start with asking. There is a legal way of doing it by asking for an emergency annual review, but at the first point, I would, as a parent, just ask the question, see if it can be moved.
Yes, I would agree. It's worth asking, whilst bearing in mind that there will be a sort of tension between the legal duty to provide an annual review on a year. Annual is yearly, so it should be before the anniversary of the issuing of the first plan or the last annual review, whichever was the latest. But then, as we talked about Section 19 principles, they have to have regard to your views, wishes and feelings and minimise disruption for you. So you could use those arguments to say, well, actually, it really doesn't matter to me whether it's now or, I'd much rather have it later. It would suit me much better. It's not going to make any difference to my child. So it's definitely worth asking about, yes.
Thank you very much. I think that's actually all we've got time for with regards to questions. Thank you very much for everyone who has attended. Unfortunately, if we haven't been able to answer your question, you can get in touch with the SENDIAS team by emailing sendias@buckinghamshire.gov.uk. I put that email address in the chat bar, and also you can message through the online contact form, and the link is also in the chat bar there. We will be providing the PowerPoint slides to you and also a recording of the session. That will also contain useful links to be able to get in touch with the SENDIAS team, or you can also obviously look at the information that's been presented today. Do we have any final words from Andrew or Sarah at all?
I would just say, if you can possibly use our contact form to contact us rather than email, that really helps us to help you more efficiently. So yeah, please use that in preference if you can, please.
Andrew, any final words?
Just to say that I noticed in the questions, there's a number about how meetings are recorded and how you follow up when things are not dealt with, and how you deal with language that is sometimes directed against parents. We will be talking later, possibly another webinar on complaints or questioning, but also I think we'll with Sarah work on some guidance on how we can, what you should be seeking in terms of meetings and recordings, and how you could follow up on that if you don't get what you've been promised.
Perfect. So yeah, obviously everyone can keep an eye out for the next session, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Thank you very much for everyone who's attended.
Thank you.